First of all, thank you to everyone joining us from across the country and around the world. I'm Michael Higgs, the Virtual Programs Manager here at Conscious Capitalism. And on behalf of the entire CCI team, we always appreciate you taking time to learn and grow in community with us. Today, I'm extremely excited to be sharing space with Emily Block and Viva Bartkus. As many of you know, Conscious Capitalism is a global community of CEOs, presidents, founders, board members, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders from diverse industries, backgrounds, and perspectives who are committed to the shared purpose of elevating humanity through business. Several times a month, we offer our virtual gatherings for the community to see how this philosophy takes shape in the leadership journeys and business practices of those in our community and network. Just a few housekeeping details. Today's conversation is going to run for about 45 minutes. I'll be in conversation with both Emily and Viva for about 25 to 35. We're going to save the last 10 minutes or so for Q&A. And then we're going to do something unique and different. First time, we're going to have a member Q&A, and that is a Q&A that's reserved for the Conscious Capitalism member community. Throughout the conversation today, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the Q&A box. That's along the bottom of the Zoom UI. And we are going to get to as many of those questions as we can during our time together. Just to kind of set today's conversation up, today's frontline regions are areas in cycles of violence and extreme poverty, yet they represent about 20 trillion in economic activity. And many companies have deemed the front lines too risky, unpredictable, and downright dangerous for potential expansion, despite the untapped opportunities in these regions. And as a counterpoint, in today's book that we'll be discussing with both Emily, the author, and Viva, Business on the Edge, How to Turn a Profit and Improve Lives in the World's Toughest Places, our guests make a compelling case for bringing business to the front lines because it creates economic opportunity for communities and companies alike. Our guests are founders of the groundbreaking Business on the Frontlines MBA course at the University of Notre Dame, named one of the 10 most innovative courses in the US by Forbes. They draw on 15 years of real-world experience running 80 growth-oriented business projects in 30 countries, with partners ranging from General Electric, Newmont Mining, Accenture, the Green Mountain Coffee, U.S. Army Special Operations Command, the Foundation for Amazon Sustainability, and the Catholic Church to offer a roadmap for accessing expansion opportunities in uncertain environments while also reducing poverty and conflict. Just a brief bio on both of our speakers. First, Viva Bartkus is an associate professor at the University of Notre Dame Mendoza School of Business. She's a former partner at McKinsey & Company and the founder of the revolutionary course Business on the Frontlines. Emily S. Block is the George M. Cormie Chair of Management in the University of Alberta School of Business. She's also a former consultant with Accenture, and she now teaches negotiations and decision-making and runs the university's Business on the Frontlines program. Welcome both. I'm so excited to be in conversation with you today. And I do want to make note of this. The book came out yesterday. It is currently sits on Amazon's #1 release in development and growth economics. So congratulations to you both. I know you're on a hectic PR schedule promoting the book. So absolutely honored to have you both join us today to discuss the book and also explore some of the similarities between your thinking, your work in the world, and what we're doing with Conscious Capitalism. So welcome both. I want to start with, yeah, absolutely. So I just want to start with the first question, because I think for many in the audience, the notion of frontline environments and the opportunities that exist there might be unknown to many of our guests. So if we could just start with that, either Emily or Viva, what is a frontline environment as you think of it and define it?
I'll start with that one. So we think about the front lines in terms of when we think about the next great opportunities for international development, we think we have to think beyond the boundaries of countries. If you ask somebody like, where are you in the world? Everybody will say, oh yeah, we're in Africa, we're in Kenya, we're in Ghana, but really they're in Nairobi and they're in Accra.
Mm-hmm.
And there are huge swaths of the world that are really untouched by markets. We think of those as the outside of the city centers in both lower income countries and also middle income countries. So if you take a country like Colombia, if anybody's been to Cartagena or Bogota or Medellin, these are beautiful cosmopolitan cities with lots of, great coffee shops and restaurants and urban life. But Cali, a province in Colombia, is very different. And if you only looked at the World Bank or the global statistics, you would kind of categorize them all as the same. But
Mm-hmm.
so we think about the frontlines regions as those that are kind of rural. They are often lawless and unstable. They're often disconnected from the services of national governments, and they're often really underinvested in. And so with some of these assumptions, we took kind of a map of the world and we calculated the amount of economic opportunity that is actually available in frontline regions. And it's actually $20 trillion and 1.4 billion people. That's the size of the EU's economy and the number of people who are in China, for example, that are working in these underserved frontline areas. And so for organizations thinking to expand, these are, this is what's left on Earth. But our argument is that it takes a bunch of different skills and practices to operate in these environments. And so we really lay out kind of what the characteristics of those environments are and how organizations can work there as well and improve people's lives through economic development, but also create some of the infrastructure and social capital and scaffolding upon which peace and stability can be rebuilt.
Mm. Yeah. I'm considering, I think we can get a little bit into the dignity of work. At Conscious Capitalism, one of the pillars of our philosophy is elevating humanity through business. I mean, one of the things I really enjoyed about the book is, for me, as I was reading the book, it really expanded the notion of the economic opportunities around the entire world and how the work that you are doing does serve to elevate humanity through business. One of the things that I want to talk about, and is one of the threads of the book, is just the notion of dignity of work, right? That a lot of, I think there's a quote in the book, nothing stops a bullet like a job. And I think it was Father Boyd of Homeboy
Oil.
Industries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Boyle of Homeboy Industries. But can we just talk about the unlocking of opportunity as it relates to the dignity of work when we're doing work in those frontline markets or economies where some are unwilling to go?
Certainly. Well, when we think about frontlines, as Professor Emily Block has defined, these are isolated, impoverished, frequently fairly lawless, and ones that have not been touched by business, which means there are tremendous opportunities based on competitive advantage. And those competitive advantage are usually from the land, so minerals and natural resources that have been underdeveloped, agriculture, and infrastructure. So these are the sectors of the economy. These are the businesses that would have the first opportunities. Now, going into a place that is fairly lawless can certainly give people a sense of risk and uncertainty. And the way we argue to address those issues is by having your business be embedded as much as possible in the local communities so that the local communities believe that your business is their business and your success is their success.
Hmm.
Let me take one example, if I may. we wouldn't normally think of mining as a really sort of an industry that would come to mind. But we've long worked with Newmont Mining in West Africa. And the way Newmont Mining has done this, they've opened one of the largest gold mines in the world in Ghana. And they have essentially worked over years and years such that they now run an entire operation of over 1,500 people with only 3 expatriates. Everyone else is from the local community. They then hire local suppliers, whether it be for uniforms or food or housing or whatever. And that has jump-started the economic ecosystem that is really supplying everything for the mine. And, you know, I've visited this mine twice. There is incredible dignity in going to work every day and doing a good day's work and earning enough money to be able to look after your family in a way that you would have never had that opportunity if the mining industry hadn't come to this part of rural Ghana and if Newmont Mining hadn't taken an approach that had bedded its operations in the community.
Yeah, and to build on the example you're giving, Viva, you know, you draw a distinction between the approach of General Electric, which is a company I think many of us know, and Newmont Mining, and the way that they looked at security, which is for businesses is a very real cost in operating in these frontline environments. And you know, for the benefit of the audience, if you want to talk a little bit or just kind of highlight the different approach that General Electric took when it looked at global security versus Newmont. I think it just highlights a unique example of an expense line item that a lot of businesses need to consider that are operating in the environments, and the distinction between both Newmont and GE.
Oh, absolutely. And, you know, former General Frank Taylor, who was an Air Force general who ran security for GE, is a friend of the Business on the Frontlines program. And we would have him in our course. He's an alum of Notre Dame and would come to our course and visit and kind of talk about their approach to security with our students. And I remember the year that kind of the Arab Spring was really like all the protests in Tahrir Square. GE's offices were actually right on the square, overlooking Tahrir Square. And we had a student that summer who was in the country. And so we were very attuned to kind of how that was developing and talking with GE a lot about their security. And they always kind of told us, you know, our approach to security is figure out what you have to do. What are the costs? What are the procedures? They run it a couple times a year, emergency procedures. They secure their people, then they secure their infrastructure, then they secure like the supply chains. And when we would press him about, you know, why aren't you in Honduras right now? He's like, well, if somebody asks me why aren't I in place X, I will say, here's what we need to do to keep you secure in place X. You tell me if that makes sense for you as a fundamental business model. My security is a fixed cost. And I very much appreciate and I love General Taylor, but I disagree. I don't think security is a fixed cost. I think it's a variable cost over time, and how you approach and how you enter and how you're able to engage with communities and create this scaffolding upon which peace and security can, you know, you can make it more expensive and you can make it much less expensive by the way you enter one of these environments. And so that really kind of this was probably in 2012 that really got us kind of solidifying our thinking about what are the ways that organizations can engage, and how businesses can actually reduce the costs of security over time. And we learned a lot and that connects right back to Newmont and learning a lot. And, you know, Newmont's one of the best organizations in the world to do that. Green Mountain Coffee is another great example where they really invest in a network of community growers in order to secure their supply chain, as opposed to Dole, which historically just buys up a big land and builds a plantation. And
Yeah.
these are different approaches. And if you look on Dole's website now, they're looking to find ways to be more like Green Mountain Coffee, because it's actually, it's hard to do at the beginning, but once you're able to amortize the risk across all of these different producers, it's actually a way of securing the supply chain.
Michael, may I just give Emily credit where credit is due? She's the one who really put this question of security into the best quote ever. You know, with General Taylor and GE, they're going to build a wall for security. And Emily was the one that figured out, you know what? You can never build a wall high enough. And reinforcing Emily's instincts was Wayne Murdy, the CEO of Newmont Mining, when he said to us, hey, look, you cannot buy enough security in these remote rural areas. If the mob wants to take over your mine, the mob will take over your mine. The best security strategy is to have the local community protect your mine. And we even had a firsthand experience of that with Newmont in Ghana, when they had a whole bunch of equipment being imported through the port of Accra. It got stuck. And even before Newmont could send its lawyers down to the port to figure out what was going on here, the elders of Brangohafo region, where the mine was being excavated, made the trek down to Accra and said to all of the port operators, hey, look, this is our equipment. We need you to ship it. We need to clear it through customs and get it back. So to me, the community becomes really important. And as you do this well, your security costs will change, given that your model is very different. So I just wanted to give Emily her quote, you can't build a wall high enough.
It also helps that I have Viva and I we are the perfect team in that we have very, we talk a lot about diversity of approaches and unusual partnerships in the ways that we kind of create these environments and capitalize and really help revitalize these environments. We are an example of a very different partnership. I have very little deference to authority. And so when General Taylor comes in and says, Bill, tell me how much it costs, I'm like, respectfully,
Well,
I want to the person who's gonna say no or hug the generals,
Yeah. I want to so again, staying with stakeholder orientation, chapter 4, you say partner broadly. That's the title of chapter 4, right? And for the benefit of the audience, there's several stories in the book where you're having dinner with local elders. I mean, arguably, your guys' stakeholder ecosystem is so unique in that I got the sense reading the book that there's not an individual or person in the network or in the community that you're not willing to talk to, not to surface an insight from, not gather a nugget of wisdom that can benefit your work. So can you guys talk a little bit, just continue a little bit down that path of how you think about your stakeholder ecosystems and building that value chain so you can do the great work that you're doing?
Viva, you want to go?
Absolutely.
Go for it.
I think that at heart, we have common ground with just about everyone. There's not anyone that Emily and I don't find some common ground with. Okay, yes, we're professors, we're doctors and things like that. But, when we're in the field, we are just Emily and Viva. We're sisters, we're moms, we're friends, we're daughters. And you can find common ground with just about everyone. The story that comes most to mind on this one is working in the Philippines with just a tremendous international humanitarian organization called World Vision. It's a Christian child-focused organization. And they asked us to help them think through how to improve their anti-child sex trafficking programming. What Emily and I did essentially with our team is lay out the entire value chain. And, it was certainly raised some eyebrows that we thought about child sex trafficking as a value chain or as a business. But I tell you, the criminal elements who run this really do think of it as a business. But what we essentially ended up doing is talking to over 80 people who touch this problem. You know, everything from sex tourism to the aunties who recruit the girls in the countryside, to the guys who look the other way in the ports as they ship them to either, you know, Cebu or to Manila. We spent time in brothels with madams and with pimps and with police and the others. And okay, maybe you pause a little bit at the beginning, but we all share the same common humanity. And I tell you, if we hadn't done this entire supply chain from beginning to end and understood what this looks like as a business, we would have never found the way to disrupt it. And it turns out the way to disrupt it is not necessarily at the beginning of the value chain or at the end of the value chain, where World Vision was really focusing its efforts on education of girls or rehabilitation of girls. It turns out the weakest link was the pimps. The pimps were working 2 jobs. They didn't have enough money to send their kids to school. They were struggling with debt. Many of them had drug addictions and the like. And it turned out that the idea in the short term to disrupt this value chain was to get better jobs for these pimps, whether it be in construction or in the merchant marine or in fishing and the like. I give a great deal of credit, and I still get goosebumps now thinking about it, how our partners at World Vision, who are a child-focused organization, reacted to our suggestion that maybe the guys who were abusing these girls were the guys that we needed to help now. Now, to their credit, in a very short period of time, their leadership came back and said, let's try it. Now, this is not a long-term solution. The long-term solution is around economic development in rural areas. It's around valuing women and girls in Filipino society more. It's enforcing the really good laws that the Philippines already have on the books. But as anyone who's in business understands, if you disrupt the supply chain, it takes a long time to rebuild the supply chain. And that was enough to get World Vision really ahead of the game in some of its programming. And honestly, I tell you, we had conversations with everyone across the spectrum and ended up finding that we had common aspirations for our family. And that's where we started, without judgment, but with the value of dialogue.
Wow. Yeah, I'm really grateful you chose to share that particular story, Viva. That was your work, particularly on that topic. You know, I'm the father of a daughter, and it was just incredibly touching, and your sort of your courage to go into that subject, but also into that community. I want to touch on, you title chapter 8 is Dirty Boots and Open Hearts, which just great name for a title. And you bring up the notion, which I actually think ties to the story that you just told, of moral imagination, right? That you encourage business leaders to extend into these communities in the spirit of partnership, but ultimately with the underlying purpose of building resilient communities. And I would just love, I hadn't heard of the term moral imagination before in a business context, but if you could just say, if you could share a little bit about that, just because I think it's a unique perspective that really I found supported some very, very creative thinking on both your and Emily's parts on all the projects that you work on.
So the term isn't ours. There's actually a really great book by that same title called The Moral Imagination by an author named John Paul Lederach, and he's a peace studies professor. And he tells some amazing stories in his book around how individuals are able to transcend cycles of violence by imagining a possible future that seems inaccessible to them at the moment, and are able to disrupt kind of the recursive kind of cyclical violent cycles in really astounding ways. And so we borrowed that from him and really use that to describe the ability to think beyond what's been done in the past, or what seems possible right now, but to look for an alternative way to consider and conceptualize what is imagining possibilities in a particular environment. And in our case, it's doing so with the desire to use market principles in a way that actually improves people's lives in a sustainable way. And I think it's really important to distinguish what we do here, what we want to talk about as from CSR, because I think there's lots of really great things that are being done in CSR around the world, but we're not talking about that here, because if I have to put my money on either people's goodwill or their self-interest, I will always place it on their self-interest. And I believe fundamentally that by imagining the possibilities, that there's actual ways to really create this mutual profit and livelihood benefit through focusing on the possibilities that derive from businesses' self-interest and build markets. And so in this case, the moral imagination is something that I think the director of World Vision at that time really showed, is the ability to transcend his own framework and say we can do things differently to achieve our ends. And I also believe that's the case for business leaders who can look for new opportunities. And absolutely, I see Chris talking in the chat. Jacqueline Novogratz is a huge I'm just a huge Jacqueline Novogratz stan, and her manifesto for a moral revolution is very much in line with, and her general philosophy coming from her first biography around the blue sweater was really about the idea of coupling these things together and using our moral imagination in that particular way.
But Emily, I think you should also talk about dirty boots. Those are your words, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful description. So please.
I mean, I think of dirty boots as really a method more than maybe it's somewhat of a philosophical orientation, but I feel like a lot of approaches to doing business in anywhere in foreign environments involves this kind of drive-by, fly-in, fly-out practice where people are, meeting with ministers in conference rooms or hotels in capital cities. And I think this is not just businesses. This is also my critique of aid, that a lot of these decisions are being made in boardrooms rather than in fields or community centers. And one of the observations that we've had when we're working with partners is you can always kind of tell who knows what's happening, depending on how dirty their boots are. Just because somebody says they work for an NGO or says that they have the pulse of the people, if they're wearing really shiny shoes, they're probably not out there in the field really collecting data, really understanding the microprocesses. And so we use that as kind of a rallying cry and a method around the types of relationships and the types of data collection that you have to be able to engage in order to really capitalize on and develop a better understanding of how to operate in these markets.
I want to jump to your work with the U.S. military. I think business academics, professors being embedded with U.S. Army Special Forces is not something that we typically think about. And you've done multiple deployments. I think you did one in West Africa and Central America with Army Special Forces Command. And I just want to there seemed to be, as you sort of found common ground. I'll just be candid. One of the Special Forces command sergeants, said, "What the fuck can I learn from these two ladies?"
I mean, I'm
He didn't
Canadian.
even say ladies.
Oh, okay. I guess, yeah.
Little
From these
girls.
two little girls. Yeah.
Yeah.
But um, this sergeant then followed up and said, I cannot stop thinking about how differently I would have spent 38 million on the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. So I'm curious, can you for the audience's benefit, just share a little bit about that relationship and the work that you did together?
Certainly. Professor Emily Block and I had been working in frontline areas, mainly with multinational corporations and NGOs, some of which were tied to the Catholic Church, but some of which were child-focused or education-focused or environmental-focused. And when we thought about this from basic principles, we thought, who else really has a stake in the front lines? And as I learned long ago, no one loves peace more than a soldier. And so our thought was, could we engage in a conversation with some of our military folks to see what we could learn together? It was very much an exploratory one. And I'll tell you when Emily and I are good, and I'll tell you when we're lucky. And in this particular case, it was 100% lucky. One of our students in the first Business on the Frontlines program that worked in Bosnia, when we started talking about this several years later, he just said, "Viva, I can't believe it. I can't believe your timing." Turns out my brother was just promoted to a 3-star Special Forces general, and he's taking over command of U.S. Army Special Operations Command. And I was like, okay. So we had all of our former military who are also our alumni. We wrote a 2-page memo, and he handed it to his brother during Thanksgiving, which was initially what got us the conversation. It turned out we had quite a bit of common ground because nothing stops a bullet like a job. You said that right at the beginning. Our friend, Father Greg Boyle at Homeboy Industries gave us that comment many years ago. And so in many of these unstable areas that are really priorities for our national security, it's a race to get opportunities for military-age males to actually get a job and be part of a community and have dignity and maybe marry someone's daughter or maybe run a business or have their own home. And our military is outstanding in the way it's trained, but it does not have very much business or economics experience. And so what we were able to do is bring business acumen together with their security expertise in West Africa and in Central America to really start building stability through engaging in businesses. Because frankly, if our soldiers can't be deployed there, business is the persistent presence that can keep going there and build the stability and hire the military-age males. So that's how that whole story started. And it's been a tremendously rewarding collaboration ever since.
And, I think one of the things that's really come to as really part of this initiative is really looking at business and economics can not only rebuild countries that are affected by violence, but it also can be a real indicator of the leading indicators of conflict. So you're seeing not only economic decline is as an obvious precursor to conflict, but actually the rapid growth of an industry can also indicate that conflict is quite possible as an outgrowth of that. For example, when gold was found in Senegal, Senegal has some very unstable borders and lots of wildcat, what they call artisanal, which makes me feel like we're talking about Etsy, so it makes me uncomfortable to call it that. But artisanal mining, where a bunch of young men who have few opportunities are going to come across the border because they've found gold in Senegal, and they're going to, try and bet their life on making it big, and most of them don't. And that's a very good place for recruitment for extremist organizations. And so, one of the things that we talk a lot with our military partners is how can we use economic concepts and a better understanding of economic conditions to understand where conflict is likely to occur so that they can engage in conflict prevention, not just response.
Yeah, I think that you do such a fantastic job highlighting that in the book, right? This is about conflict prevention. And what an absolutely unique relationship that you've formed to do that work. I do want to offer, if the audience has any questions, feel free to drop those in the Q&A. I've got a few more for both of you. The first one is just for business leaders, business owners who are looking at expanding into these new markets. How should they think about it? I mean, what are a few ways that, or a few considerations?
I'll let Viva take that one to start.
Of course. So a couple of things. Number one, you're going to need a little humility and a willingness to learn, because, almost any plan you make in some shiny office in some city in the US is just going to be wrong. The next thing is we have always had a philosophy of failing fast and failing forward. So assuming you do all the research about the place and you start building local relationships, both of which are instrumental, you're going to start having ideas. You got to just try them and get market feedback from these vastly different markets. We say fail fast and fail forward because we're assuming that the first couple ideas are not going to be that good. We just refine them and refine them and refine them as we build these businesses and markets. But we also fail forward, which means that we keep the big picture in mind of the opportunity, whatever the business or market opportunity might be. And it's always going to take a little longer. But that's okay, because there are real first mover advantages, and you want to start now. There's a great African proverb: the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today.
Yeah. So just kind of dovetailing off of that, what are some of the biggest lessons, or maybe you just want to highlight one or two, some really big lessons? I mean, you guys have worked in, I think, 80 different projects, I mentioned, over 30 countries. I mean, it seems to be a region of the world that you have your work has not touched. I mean, it's just incredibly vast. What's maybe one of the lessons or failures or successes? I leave it to you to kind of run with either one from a specific project that you've worked on.
So for me, one of the biggest lessons is that it's so important when choosing partners not to just jump at the first person who puts their hand up or who offers their help. We've had an experience in particular that caused that was a worst case, that could have been a worst case scenario of this, and I'll tell you the story. But in general, this isn't just about mitigating the worst case scenario. Like, the worst case, you can have really crappy partners that'll get you in trouble. But even if it's not the worst case scenario, you're going to be truncated in your view of the world, right? And you're going to be gathering only a subset of data, which limits your ability to create value. But in worst case, you could end up meeting somebody and working with someone who has a shadow affiliation that you don't know anything about. And in that case, we were working in Lebanon, and we were introduced by a very reputable partner to somebody to work with us to help us develop economic opportunities. And this person was vetted and vouched for, and he was a businessman and had he spoke really eloquently and cared about his country. And it was only by kind of listening and talking to people around, listening to the whispers, that we found out that he actually was the area Hezbollah commander. And that's a big deal, because our friends who had vouched for them had been unknowingly working on development projects with a terrorist organization. Because, and so I think the challenge is knowing in these environments, not everything is what it looks like. And there are lots of actors who everybody has a side gig, everybody has a shadow affiliation. There's always layers to these relationships. And I think that's really kind of goes back to this notion of dirty boots, which is that unless you really kind of diversify your partners and spend some time with them and listen to lots of different perspectives, it's really easy to be like, oh, that person can manage all my stuff. Perfect. I'll just work with them. They look great. And best case scenario, you're limiting yourself to a particular view of the world. Worst case scenario, you might be able to get yourself into a little bit of trouble.
I think for me, one of the biggest lessons was for my mind and for my heart. And I'll be the first one to admit, I probably started this whole journey of business on the front lines with my McKinsey partner hat on. I had spent 10 years solving some of the world's toughest problems with some of the greatest teams. You know, there wasn't a problem we couldn't crack and the like. And I think that meant that in my heart, when I came to these places, I thought I was sort of the problem solver, and I thought I was going to bring some of the solutions. And in our 4th year, we were working with the Archbishop of Zacapa in Guatemala, and he was a remarkable man. And as he, sent us off in Zacapa, which is a pretty tough place, like, I started counting guns on our first morning, just guns, and I got to 50 by 10 a.m. and then I just stopped counting. So just to give you a feel for this part of Guatemala. And the Archbishop said to us, as he gave us his blessing and sent us out, he said, walk in the footsteps of the campesinos, not to understand their challenges, but to understand their dreams. And I think what the Archbishop was really trying to say to my mind and to my heart is that, yes, you're a very nice McKinsey partner and, Notre Dame professor, and sure, you're in a really impoverished, isolated, fairly lawless part of Guatemala, but you can learn from everyone. You can learn from these campesinos. And after that, he turned everything on its head for me. And since that time, we both teach and we learn all the time simultaneously. And I think for me, that was a really big lesson.
Thank you for that. I want to, again, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We have about 1 minute remaining. I'm just going to put, again, the title of the book was just dropped into chat. Let me also grab a link quickly for you. You can find it. Give me 1 moment. Let me give you. Thanks for your patience there. I wanted to get a shortened link. I had a very long link, but you can find the book in the Conscious Capitalism bookstore. Again, Business on the Edge. I also wanted to just in closing ask both Emily and Viva, how can people remain in touch with you, whether it's LinkedIn or find out more about your MBA program, what some of your latest projects are, all of the above. Okay, dropped. Is that LinkedIn?
Throwing them in the chat.
Okay, nice.
Oh,
nice.
sorry, that's my X. Prof. Emily Block is X or Twitter. Also, I'll just dump my email in there.
And can you dump mine and my emails and my LinkedIn, Emily, while you're at it?
Yeah, yours is, I think your LinkedIn is Viva Bartkus.
It is. Not very creative.
I also just put a link in just for a brief survey. Yeah, and I want to thank both of you. Just the book. One of the things I was really touched by is that you're doing the work. I mean, I love that. Again, going back to the dirty boots. These are firsthand accounts of your work in these regions. You're not just academics, sharing a perspective and sending people out into the field. Oftentimes you are in the field doing the work, and absolutely loved all the anecdotes in the book. Yeah, just cannot recommend the book enough. And I know it's summer vacation for a lot of people, so when you're traveling the world, open your eyes. Maybe you're not traveling to a frontline environment like Emily or Viva, but there's always market economies at play. There's always transactions happening. And it was just really unique to get a perspective on the work that you're doing, the partners that you have, and just your work in the world. So thank you. For those members that are part of the Conscious Capitalism founding member group, we are going to stay on the same Zoom line. For those that are not, we'll be sending out some information about membership. If you signed up for this webinar, you'll learn about it. But those Conscious Capitalism members, if you want to stay on, Chris Schaefer, I hope you're here. You asked me the question about the Bank of Uganda. Thank you, Warrior. Appreciate you joining us today from Madrid. Chris, I hope you're here because I think Viva and Emily might have a perspective for you on partnership, conscious capitalism in the Bank of Uganda. Greg, thanks for being here. Just some appreciations to both Viva and Emily. Bridget, thank you. Let's see, we have a Q&A. Rachel, we will be opening membership up in August. That's what I can answer for you about founding membership. But thanks for the question. And Chris is with us. Okay. Chris, thanks for being here. Yeah, Rachel, again, fascinating work and talk. Yeah, I know we only had 45 minutes, but the book is awesome. So I read a lot of business books, but this one was incredibly unique. And for our senior business leaders, the creative thinking required to operate in the environments that both Emily and Viva go into, that is inspiring unto itself. I mean, it will make you rethink your whole stakeholder ecosystem. Chris, I'm going to go ahead and thank you, Al. I'm going to see if Chris, if I can actually bring you on screen, if that's possible. I think it is. First time for everything. Let me look at the participant list. All right, Chris, I'm going to bring you on screen to just ask your question of both Emily and Viva again about the Bank of Uganda. And if there are any other members of the Conscious Capitalism community, just shoot me a message and I'll promote you as well. And Chris, you should have just gotten an invite to join. So you'll be coming on as a panelist here in a moment. Oh, welcome, Chris. How are you?
I'm fine. Not quite ready for my photo shoot, but
oh no, what? Yeah.
I've got Viva. I'm working on the blonde look.
Wonderful.
If it makes you feel better, I was on Bloomberg News, on Monday, thinking it was radio, and it was actually video. And I have a 3-year-old, and she had done my hair. So
I love it. So, Michael, what would you like me to do? Is to tell them the question that's been posed to me?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'm gonna leave it to you, Chris, to explain the opportunity, your questions, anything you might be curious about.
Okay. Okay. A little bit of background, Emily and Viva. I am one of the certified consultants in conscious capitalism, and part of sometimes you make a choice about what your essence is. Mine is as a messenger, generous wisdom. And with that, I aligned with the International Association for Strategy Professionals and have been doing programming with them for the past 2.5 and 3 years to teach those strategic planners around the world about conscious capitalism. In June last month, I did a presentation, a master class, second year in a row, and the man who is the strategic planner for the Bank of Uganda, so that's the central bank, that's the central banking system, has posed to me the question of bringing conscious capitalism to Uganda. Now, we have yet to do a little bit more discovery about what that could mean. So that's number one. It's not a fully formed idea, and of course, I am full of questions and taking a look at what is there. That's number one. Number two is I want to partner with people who are diverse, and I'll start with age. This is a long-term project. I won't be around in 20 years. So I want to make sure that I align with others, and to your point, Emily, vetting them carefully and well as I continue to explore this opportunity for Uganda.
So my inclination, knowing very little about it, would be to do exactly what we would do, which would be find a project that somebody, a small project to engage in, right? I would say to find a business partner, an organization that would say, what's, if you had a bunch of time and extra resources, what are the things that you really would want to explore, and kind of actually build a network in Uganda through engaging in that project and kind of running a play in a micro sense. What's your inclination, Viv?
I think that's exactly right. I think what you must find, Chris, is the banking leader that has the moral imagination that Emily was talking about before. If they have the moral imagination, then they'll be able to see beyond Uganda's normal elites, which frankly are quite predatory and take up way too much of the economy and of the opportunity. But the moral imagination here is to turn it on its head and start making the Bank of Uganda really work for the locals, work for the local customers, look for the local suppliers, and work for the local employees. That's possible. We have seen organizations in Uganda successfully able to do this, but it takes real moral fiber and some intestinal fortitude and the moral vision to be able to do that. So, to me, this really rests on you finding those within the Bank of Uganda who are willing to work with you on some sort of project together that will be really good for the locals.
Yeah. And, the big fear for me always with these types of things is the fear of co-optation, right? There are lots of people who want to use these types of labels to symbolically indicate that they're taking the joint livelihoods and profit mission seriously and do it in a greenwashing or a symbolic way. And so I think the best way is kind of the toe in the pool and really, from a dirty boots perspective, working on a very specific project and getting a sense of, that's a way we kind of vet our partners with that initial project too, right? We go on the ground and we listen to what people say about our partner. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we've faced is transcending our own partners' networks. So when we're not in country for a very long time, right? And on one hand, you need your partner to give you legitimacy, to give you access to people. But on the other hand, if the only people you talk to are those that are vetted and kind of scheduled from your partner, you're just getting their view of the world. And so we kind of operate our partner's itinerary and then a shadow itinerary on the second. We divide into two groups. One, we kind of do all the shaking hands, kissing babies that our partner plans. And then we kind of snowball sample our second itinerary, breaking up into two groups. And really asking questions. And we found that the partners who really are looking to make substantive changes and really understand our process are very happy to alter their itinerary. And the partners that are concerned with giving us a unified version of the story tend to kind of corral us and try and prevent us from doing this alternate. But really, this is us co-producing with the partner. And if our partner is not willing to really look, we can't do it ourselves. We don't have the local knowledge. And so we're really kind of training and bringing in our partners with us and evangelizing or converting them to our process and method. And our most enduring and durable partners have really kind of used us as a way to forward their own interests while really being open and flexible to our recommendations and our processes on the ground.
Mm.
Well, I mean, there are, a couple of quick examples that come to my mind. One is the central bank in Zimbabwe to help the locals. Never realized that one of the biggest and sudden expenses for them is to pay for the funeral that honors their dead. You don't have enough money for that. So instead of going to the bank for a loan, the bank created like an insurance policy. So you pay just a little bit, and when you need the money to honor your dead, you have the money from that bank. That's an example. Another one is in the Philippines. It's called networks. And in poor villages, those fishermen harvest ghosted nets. So a ghosted net, of course, is trash. It's filth. They harvest them, clean them, and they're converted into fiber that is used in apparel. When the typhoon hit the Philippines, the first thing they did is rebuild the business. And as a result of that business, they now have the need for banks. They never had enough money to save. They have a well, they have schools, they have other jobs, they have little stores now in places that they had never been able to do it.
And if I would add on to that, the idea of moving savings from kind of table banking or savings and lending community Visa boxes to banking systems is actually a way of climate change mitigation and disaster preparedness. Because when everybody has all their savings collectively in a box in a typhoon or a hurricane prone area, that's an emergency preparedness problem.
Exactly.
So
we are very much in Uganda. We've been working there for years, and I know we both love Uganda a great deal. So if there's some way we can be of assistance to you in the future, please just holler. The answer is already yes.
We have a couple of really good partners, and also, I'm still running, and Notre Dame is also still running business on the frontline groups, and we partner with organizations all over. So let's keep this conversation going. This is a real opportunity to look for ways to collaborate,
and learn from each other.
Yes. Let's think about this.
The universe provides. Thank you, Michael.
Indeed, the universe always does provide. Correct. Well, thank you both for your generosity. I wasn't sure that the offer would be made, but that's very touching. Thank you. We had a couple people hang around, so you got to kind of hear a live question posed. And yeah, just again, I know that you guys probably have a very busy PR schedule. So thank you for making time for our community today. Very, very grateful that we were able to have this conversation. And I wish you the best as you spread the word of the good of the book and yeah, just inspired by your work in the world. So thank you.
And let us know if there's any way we can serve conscious capitalism and continue to build kind of a community of people who care about these things.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Viva. And
we
thanks,
look
Chris,
forward
for the
to it.
question.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care.
Have a great day.